Welcome. The Pyx Trust Architecture Education Series exists because Pyx genuinely cares about building and supporting a community of trust architects. If you'd like to access information, tech docs, and tools, plus connect with others doing similar work, we invite you to head to pyx.io and check out the resources menu and to join us at chat.pyx.io. There you'll find Pyx CEO Zach Zeus, me, the Pyx team, and a growing group of people working on supply chain and global trade trust and transparency. In webinars 1 through 10, we have covered the policy context behind the UN Transparency Protocol, why it exists, how it works, and what it's trying to achieve. More recently, we've shifted into practical territory for people actively exploring UNTP. Today's session continues that focus, looking at how existing trust components and mechanisms work with the UN Transparency Protocol. So let's get started. I'll hand it over to Pyx CEO Zach Zeus for webinar number 11 in the Pyx Global Trust Architecture Education Series, Trust Components in UNTP.
Thanks, Rochelle. In today's webinar, I'm going to be going through trust components for UNTP. We are going to follow our standard approach to our trust architecture series, where we sort of introduce the topic and go through the three pillars of trust architecture. And those three pillars are policy and standards, business acumen, and technology to support that. In this session, we're really going to focus on how the technical protocol components of UNTP reinforce the policy, standards, and business opportunities that we articulate in those first two sessions. And part of what we're going to articulate in this process is that trust is primarily institutional, and the technology that we use to support trust is does not replace those institutional components that we talk about. We're going to go into that in a little bit of detail as we go through the session today. Our vision is a future where business, people, and communities are most successful because they're making the world better. And we see that vision coming to life through architecting trust for a better world. And our view is that trust architects combine three distinct disciplines to enable that future. The business value creation for organizations, because if there isn't business value in doing this work, the work won't get done. Community, policy, and standards, that's the operating environment that we all work in as businesses, as people, as organizations, as community members. And so making sure that we incorporate sort of the environment in which we work into our consideration of architecting trust is critically important. And then the technology is a key enabler for sort of the strategic change that is occurring around the world. And it's important that we acknowledge the technology and leverage technology, but we don't let technology override the value that's created for businesses and the sort of social license to operate that we all need in order to operate in the communities in which we all live and work. And we'll go through that as we go through today's session. One of our key tools for architecting trust is the United Nations Transparency Protocol. It's not the only one. Actually, we're going to touch on another component of this later in the presentation, which is the UNCFACT GTR project, kind of described as GRID. But UNTP is the starting point, and then we'll talk about GRID as we go through that. And it's a protocol architected to simplify solving the complex challenge of trade. Now, that's a complicated diagram that I have in front of you. But the core idea is in the middle in that green box, which is how to simplify the exchange of data between suppliers of products and services and their buyers. And we do that through four distinct data packets: product passports and facility records at green right in the middle, and traceability events and conformity credentials around the edges. We'll talk more about those data elements later. All the rest of it is how you find, understand, secure, and value those four data components. And so It's really the four data components with value, security, understandability, and discoverability surrounding them to make that data more relevant in a business and policy and context. We are working on quite a large number of UNTP extensions, and they cover roughly a quarter of the global economy. Now, there are various phases of evolution and various phases of adoption, but if we look across the value that's sort of identified here, it's roughly 25% of global trade. And there are some key areas around sort of the evolving energy transition, particularly around critical raw materials and batteries and electronics and auto parts components. So those are big pieces of sort of the energy transition, as well as some work in textiles and agriculture. Getting into the trust idea, we grabbed this triangle of trust from the Seven Rules of Trust book by Wikipedia co-founder Jimmy Wales. And actually, that triangle comes from research that's come out of, I believe it's Harvard, as well as sort of what is required for people to trust things. And this triangle of trust sort of coalesces authenticity, empathy, and logic. But all of them kind of coalesce to one core idea, which is reliability. And one of the things that we see, and particularly as we look at sort of building a protocol to simplify global trade and simplify transparency in global trade, is making sure we reuse existing systems that work to maintain reliability. And so we're going to show how the UNTP protocol can leverage and augment existing technology and policy structures to improve trust. And we're going to kind of go through that through this discussion. Now we're going to talk about community policy and standards that support trust in global trade ecosystems. And so UNTP is not trying to reinvent the wheel. And so just to kind of grab some comments from various elements of UNCFACT Recommendation 49 and the UNTP specifications. And these are the kind of Recommendation 49 is the policy document called Transparency at Scale. And so basically the key idea from Rec 49 is supporting instruments should build on existing sustainability standards and regulations and rather than introducing new ones. And so the core idea of UNTP is to describe how data is exchanged, but not really get into what data is exchanged, because what data is described in regulations, how really should be up to a consistent protocol. Another one is, unless required by legislation, supporting instruments should build on existing identifier schemes and data carriers rather than introducing new ones. Again, there's been tons of investment in identifiers. We're going to talk a lot about identifiers when we get to the technical section. But when we go to the supermarket and our products are scanned at checkout and the machine beeps, that beeps because there's a global standard around product identifiers for products. And there's a global identifier scheme that supports that standard. And that's how, no matter where you go in the world, when you scan at the supermarket, there's a unique number on that product. Going on, UNTP must build on and be compatible with globally adopted digital trust frameworks and standards. So again, don't reinvent the wheel. We'll talk a bit about some of those trust frameworks and standards later. And the UNTP must support the use of existing assurance and attestation mechanisms. So that's existing conformity assessments. So conformity assessments are things like ISO 27001 certifications or ANCAP safety ratings or car seat testing, all the things that we kind of almost take for granted, but means that we have safe food to eat and safe vehicles to drive, there's a whole existing assurance and attestation mechanism that kind of backs all of that. So we want to make sure we're able to leverage that. And the UNTP must ensure that participating trust systems can interoperate through defined protocols. Again, making sure we're not reinventing the wheel. UNTP does not redefine assessment criteria, replace sustainability standards, reset pass-fail thresholds, decide what constitutes compliance with existing standards and regulations, set or reverse credibility or trust rules, override scheme ownership, or centralized data or governance. So that's a whole mouthful about what UNTP does not. But basically what that's trying to say is the UNTP as a protocol is not trying to replace the existing things that you already have in your business, already are using to verify information. What it does do, though, is take advantage of those existing things and make the credentials about those existing things more discoverable. Enables product passports to be enhanced with verifiable credentials. We'll talk a little bit about what that means when we get to the technical session. Connecting products and claims to sources that can be verified. We'll talk about that as well. And provide a shared language and framework for communicating things like compliance. And then ensure that we can support interoperability across jurisdictions and schemes. It's no good to have a transparency scheme that works in one country but doesn't work in another, because trade is global and it's important that we make it simple for domestic as well as international compliance. So from a policy perspective, leveraging existing global standards and policies means we're not reinventing the wheel. From a business perspective, we're going to talk about how our existing investments and assurances have value even as we adopt the United Nations Transparency Protocol. And so UNTP is really designed to deliver more value from the work you already do. Make it easier and cheaper for you to differentiate your products or your production processes or your production facilities to your customers by more consistently sharing information about your products and facilities, and also being able to link proof about the claims you're making about your products and facilities. And that proof in the form of third-party attestations that you've actually done and said what you're trying to do. And so what it creates is compliance as a competitive differentiator. It allows you to use existing things. So it's a protocol, not a platform that you sort of put. It's not a platform where you put all of your data in. It's a protocol where you can decide what data you share and make it discoverable. And then those credentials that you decide to share are published and discovered and verified so that your customers and their customers and their customers can discover the information that you publish about your products and facilities. So we want to make sure that you can reuse the same evidence across markets. So it delivers value across the trust ecosystem, more value from existing compliance work so that you don't have to duplicate work. So that's as you're thinking about publishing information about your products or facilities, publishing in a consistent way using a UNTP product passport, facility record, conformity credential, and traceability event means that your customers can decide what they want to use, as opposed to being asked over and over again for the same information. You publish it once and reuse many times. For scheme owners, and schemes are things like evaluation schemes, third-party audits, sustainability schemes, greenhouse gas schemes. By publishing your scheme criteria in a consistent way, it adds value to your schemes by making them more valuable to people who consume your schemes. And it also means that your scheme authority is visible and verifiable. For industry bodies, interoperability without loss of authority, shared language for communicating existing trust components across borders. What we mean by that is ensuring that when your members articulate the value of your membership, so if you're the Champagne authority in France, you add value to your members by ensuring that only the language of Champagne is used by your members. And that membership is defined by the boundaries of your location, but that pattern can repeat across multiple different industry and membership organizations and bodies. So businesses can get more value out of the work they already do. So from a technology perspective, we're going to talk about how these trust components kind of build on top of each other and how the technical elements of UNTP augment your existing systems and mean that you get even more value out of the work that you're already doing. So you keep your existing ERP systems and traceability systems and audit programs and assurance frameworks and identifier schemes. What UNTP adds to that is a way to reference trust components, a shared structure for sharing credentials and claims, interoperability between systems, and verifiability without centralization of data. And we're going to talk about how that does occur. But it doesn't mean zero change. So there is change that needs to occur as you go through the process. So it does require some systems to expose or reference trust components in UNTP compatible ways. It does sort of expect that claims credentials assessments to be expressed using shared structures and vocabularies and verifiability. And we'll talk a little bit about that verifiability in a second. Identifiers, issuers, and evidence to be machine interpretable and verifiable so that algorithmic validation and verification can be done. And alignment with existing open standards rather than bespoke formats. So ensuring that the what of interoperability or the how of interoperability is maintained while you add elements or extend it to meet your specific needs. So making sure the how data exchange is standardized while you meet specific needs. So the next question is how verifiable credentials create trusted data. So we talked in the intro about kind of the four components of the data in UNTP. And the key ones that we kind of really flag are the digital product passports and the digital facility records. The conformity credentials and the traceability events add to those two. But all four of them are issued as verifiable credentials. And what a verifiable credential means is that we can trust the data that's attached or that's been put inside of that we can trust the data that's inside that credential. And we can trust it because of the cryptographic signatures that come with a verifiable credential. So basically the issuer, and this is the business that is sharing this data, signs a credential with their private key. And then verifier use the issuer's public key to confirm the credential is authentic and unaltered. If any data changes, the signature becomes invalid, making the credentials tamper-proof. So basically, when you receive a credential from your supplier, you can make sure that that data hasn't changed since they issued it. And even more valuable is if your supplier shares information from their supplier, you know that the information that they're sharing about their upstream supply chain has also not been tampered with. And that's what the use of verifiable credentials adds from a data immutability perspective. Effectively, the data you get, as long as it's verifiable, as long as you can verify it, means that the data hasn't changed. And the credential contains all the cryptographic proof needed to verify it instantly without contacting the issuer. So you don't have to go and go back to to a centralized system to verify information. You can verify information just using the math of the public credential of the public key to verify the information. And so trust comes from mathematics, not from organizational relationships or even connecting to systems. Now, an obvious question comes up when you kind of think about this, which is how do you trust the issuer that the organization that issued the credential is the organization that you expect. So what sort of using verifiable credentials does means that you can know for sure who the issuer was, but how do you know for sure that the issuer was the actual company that you expected it to be? And so how do I trust the signatures on the verifiable credentials? How do I know that it's apple.com that signed this and not app1e.com? So there's not sort of a hacker in the middle. And the too long don't read answer is GRID and DI answer the two questions for trade document verification. So how do you know if an identifier has been issued by a nation state authoritative register? So this directory. So the core idea here is that a business is identified by a national registry. So we register businesses in countries, and and those countries then issue can verify that that company is actually the owner of a signing certificate. And how do you know that the organization presenting the identifier has the right to present it? And that's through the digital identity anchor. Now, these are some pretty technical topics, and we'll go through them in more detail in a future webinar. But the core idea is we have a global ecosystem, a global registrar of trusted authorities, and then we have a digital identity anchor to pull through the data. And so, how does the grid work in practice? So, basically, the idea is that the that we'll have a global registrar information directory called GRID, and basically it's voluntary. So nation state registrars choose to apply to the GRID. It's trustworthy. GRID verifies eligibility and quality requirements. It's self-sustained, so participants manage their data on the GRID. And the GRID only has data about registrars and their registers, not any of the specific identifiers. That's delegated out to the registrar, the registers in each nation or in each nation state. And so what this basically this idea comes from how passports work. And so when we go to a smart gate at an airport and we present our passport, what happens behind the scenes is the public key of the country that published the passport is checked against a centralized register. They don't check that the passport has been that the passport number is true, like that's not shared. Only checks that the keys that have signed the passport are true, and that same pattern is applied here, and this is how that works. And then the digital identity anchor allows a business to link their signing keys to their authoritative register. And so basically, the authority issues a digital identity anchor that includes the signatures that I use to sign my passports. And so by having sort of an authoritative register of the grid and the digital identity anchor credential linked together means that when I present my digital product passport from my company here in Australia, my customer knows for sure that I am from an Australian business and that it is my business that has signed the credential that they're reading. And that creates what we describe as a chain of trust, which is the next topic that we're going to talk about. And so how linked data creates trusted claims. So that idea of a digital identity anchor connecting to authoritative register issuing a digital identity anchor that I use to issue my facility record or conformity claim or product passport gives me the ability to link claims together. And so that's linking claims to just the claims I'm issuing. But the next level of linking of claims is linking multiple claims together to understand a more comprehensive value chain claim. And so one of the key questions that we've been exploring in one of our global pilots is how to know the country of origin of mined material in a battery passport. Now, up on our upper right-hand side is a complex value chain that roughly describes creating electronic goods, including batteries. And that's complicated and messy and busy, but it has a consistent pattern, which is a set of linked claims that you can kind of use what we describe as a trust graph to kind of link back into the set of information necessary to validate the claims. And so in the example we have in the animation below is on the far left-hand side, we have a mine that produces cobalt hydroxide. It goes through a distillation leaching process to create battery grade cobalt. and goes into a precipitation process to build precam, and then it goes into a calcination process to create CAM. But by linking all the way back, I can see that the cobalt hydroxide was mined in a specific country. And so I can verify the country of origin of mined materials through these set of linked claims that match the manufacturing process. And so that sort of idea of linked claims and verification of linked claims gives us the ability to understand, to create trusted claims about a product based on linked data. And then how do I trust the claims being made? So one of the things that people often say to us is, I don't trust, I don't, if a company says to me they've done something, I don't trust unless a third party has verified that claim. This is the and this is reusing third-party verification ecosystems, as we talked about the first thing. And the whole point of a digital conformity credential is to enable a third-party auditor to issue verification of the claims being made and being able to link those claims back to the product passport or facility record. And so the third-party auditors issue the conformity credentials. Manufacturers link their conformity credentials to the claims they're making about their facilities and products. And scheme owners publish guidance on the validity of claims being made, the conformity vocabulary catalog. Here's how I link the claims in the product passport and the facility record to the conformity credential that's been issued, and tests that enable customers to verify claims against certifications. And so those are some of the technical approaches. Those are most of them. There's some more that kind of get into pretty deep technical details to reinforcing the existing trust ecosystems that exist around trade and business.
Okay, so thank you for your thoughtful questions and for being an active part of today's discussion. Hopefully you found the session valuable, and we encourage you to stay connected with us and the Pyx Global Trust Architect community. So check out pyx.io and join us at chat.pyx.io. We look forward to seeing you at our webinar next month, and we'll announce the date and subject of that session shortly. Till then, thanks very much.
Thanks, Rochelle. Thanks, everybody.